Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, and founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share some thoughts with you today. Today's topic of the talk for today is social engineering and the Hegelian dialectic. Social engineering and the Hegelian dialectic. Now, just to lay the foundation and give you a couple of definitions. The first one is Hegel's dialectic, or the Hegelian dialectic. The reason I wanted to talk about these things that I'm talking about is because when I see what's going on in the news, when we see what's happening, especially in Washington, D.C., and to the uninformed and the uninitiated mind, there may be a lot of confusion. You know, this last election, a lot of things have come to the surface, and it's getting uglier and uglier in Washington, D.C. You know, one of the things that the left has said was that they were going to fight President Trump at every angle and every turn, and they're doing that. And so it's really kind of embarrassing of what's happening. You know, whether or not you like President Trump or not, whether you're Republican or Democrat, that's of no consequence. At the end of the day, we have to understand that as a nation, we need to come together and work together. And he did win the election. He is the president. And it's really shameful what's happening in Washington, D.C. And what you're seeing is an implosion of the system. The global elite system is imploding from the inside out. And it's haywire. So if you've been watching this series about the 2019 movement, I've been talking a lot about the globalists, the global elite. Some people call them the Illuminati. I like to call them the global elite because that's basically what they are. And they are pushing towards a one world government, a global economic system, and some of the things that it talks about in the book of Revelation that happens at the end. Now, these things are not good. So when you look at a global government, when you understand the one world government, the one world economic system, these are not good things. These are things that are contrary to the best interests of the public as a whole. So if you're part of the 99.5%ers, then this is not a good thing for you. It's a good thing for the global elite, the 0.5% of the world's elite, but for everybody else, it's not a good thing. And so I want to define a couple terms, and I want to try to bring some illumination and some understanding to those who are watching this, because like I said, for the most part, most of the people are blind to what's going on. Most of the people are so caught up in their own ways and their own life. They've been socially engineered and manipulated to the place that most people don't even understand what's going on. One of the things that has been very interesting to me as an African-American male, as a black man, is that black people for a long time have been criticizing the system. You know, you hear people talk about white supremacy, the institutionalized racism that goes on in this country. You know, you hear them say, they talk years and years past about how the media was not giving proper demonstrations of how black people were. They were giving a skewed view of black life, or you know, all these things that were taking place. You know, we talked about the system being set up. I've heard people say that you really don't get a true person in Washington, D.C., that both sides are, you know, they're puppets, you know. And then Obama got in office and black people kind of got sedated, basically. They got sedated because they were so happy that someone of color was in office, someone with brown skin became president, that they let their guard down. And so now they're in a panic because black America, and most of America, but especially black America to a higher degree, has been socially engineered. They've been manipulated to the place where they're really being controlled mentally and emotionally, being controlled, which is why they're in such a panic about President Trump. And they've been told that he's racist and he's sexist and he's all these type of things. And most of it is deception of the mainstream media and their lies that have been perpetrated on the American public. And I say this before I go on. You know, when you look at the election cycle, the country is almost split. When you talk about conservative or liberal, Republican or Democrat, on the last few cycles, usually the person who won, now I'm not talking about electoral votes, I'm talking about popular votes. There's only a couple of percentage points between two sides. So if you say that, I'm just saying, for example, they say Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. If she got 52% of the vote and President Trump got 48%, you know, that's 4% difference. That's not a big difference. It is still virtually almost split down the middle as far as Republicans, Democrat, social conservatives, and liberals, or whatever you want to categorize yourself as. But the media, you look at mainstream media, 90% of mainstream media not only contributed to the campaign of Hillary Clinton, but they voted for her. If you look at Hollywood, there's an overwhelming skew of liberal opinions, and they support liberal Democratic candidates. If you look in the you know, the media, like I mentioned, the media, I mentioned Hollywood, and even in sports, most athletes, it's almost like nobody can come against the popular opinion that's being, and that's part of the social engineering, and we're going to talk about that. These opinions are being given to these people who get a lot of wealth and a lot of fame and fortune, and they basically have to sell out in order to keep the groupthink going on. And they are opinion makers, and I'm going to tell you about how that's intentional, that they're opinion makers and they can't go against the grain. In Hollywood, you have to give a liberal opinion. In all these different places, you have to give a liberal opinion. The reason I brought that up is if the country is almost split between Republican and Democrat, or conservative and liberal, how is it that 90% of mainstream media, 90% of Hollywood, 90% of pro athletes, all of them have the same opinion? That's not natural, and that's not rational. It's because they're being given that opinion. It's because they're getting paid. They can't go against the grain, or they run the risk of being blackballed. So let's talk about a couple of these concepts. The first concept I want to talk to you about is Hegel's dialectic. So the Hegelian dialectic. The word dialectic is a term to describe a method of philosophical argument that involves some sort of contradictory process between opposing sides. Now that's a lot of words to say, and basically with the Hegelian dialectic, it's a form of Greek philosophy that was originated with the ancient Greeks, Plato and Socrates and all of these people. They came up with this philosophy of the dialectic, and more specifically Hegel's dialectic. So Hegel, G.W.F. Hegel, was a 19th century German philosopher, and he used this particular one. And what the Hegelian dialectic is about is they came up with a way to get public opinion to go in a certain direction by giving two opposing viewpoints. So you have it's called the thesis, the antithesis, or the antithesis, and the synthesis. So you have the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. Now, when I say thesis and antithesis, those are two opposing viewpoints. The synthesis is the direction they want to get the public to go into. So they present two opposing viewpoints in order to narrow down the public opinion and push them in the direction they want them to go. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you look in this country, we have Republicans and Democrats. That's part of the dialectic. So if you're a Republican, that's the thesis. If you're the Democrats or the liberals would be the antithesis. But in essence, they want to push the public in a certain direction. And so what they do is they control both sides of the narrative. So you have blue and red states, you have Republican and Democrat, and nobody else really gets a say in how these things go. And so the reason that you should understand that is because when you have these politicians that are all part of the same organizations, they're just two sides of the same coin. You have this person named Donald Trump who came in that they expected to get blown away by Hillary Clinton, who was absolutely she was the establishment candidate. She's been receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from the global elite to push their agenda, and they were banking on her continuing the same strategies and the same agenda that they have. President Obama pushed the same agenda that President Bush pushed, which pushed the same agenda that Bill Clinton pushed, that pushed the same agenda that George H.W. Bush pushed. All those were pushing the same globalist agenda, and so they were comfortable with that, and they thought Hillary was going to come and continue the same agenda, and she lost. And so they're in a panic because Donald Trump's coming in and he's talking against all of these global agendas that have been perpetrated against us as a group. They're pushing towards a one world government. They're looking to finish the Tower of Babel that Nimrod started, which is why on the back of your dollar bill it has the all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid. They're trying to complete the Tower of Babel that was being built in Genesis chapter 11. So you have this Hegelian dialectic. They're giving both sides of the argument. They control both sides, and in essence, they're pushing the agenda. Even if you look at Islam, Islam is a tool, ISIS and Islam is a tool of the global elite to push an agenda. So what they do is they give you the problem, they offer the solution, and they push you in the direction that they want you to go into. Order out of chaos. So they cause chaos, and then they give you the synthesis, which is the solution that they want you to go after. And so we see this Hegelian dialectic that's being perpetrated. Again, I want to just really challenge Black America to don't be so naive to the schemes of the enemy. And the reason I say so naive is because a large amount of the public is being deceived by this Hegelian dialectic. A lot of the public is believing this whole Republican Democrat thing, and it is part of the dialectic that they're controlling both sides of the argument. But Black people, African Americans, are the largest victim to this. And when I mean that they're the group that has been the most affected by this, because first of all, they also agree with the liberal Democratic point of view at 90% clip. And not only that, but when you understand the tools that have been perpetrated against them, they have impacted the Black community more than anything. So over the last 50 years, you've had the civil rights movement, you've had the war on crime, the war on drugs, the war on terror, and the war on poverty. These were all orchestrated by the global elite, and they're part of the dialectic, and it's a form of social engineering. And we're going to talk about social engineering. Social engineering is what they're doing. It's a way that they are controlling the masses using mass psychology. And it's working in our society. It really is working. So there's a couple of things you should know about. The Tavistock Institute is very instrumental in this. And the term social engineering, when you get a chance to look it up, they're using different techniques for social engineering. And so this all began with the study of psychology. So when they started to study psychology in the 19th century, they started to really study how the human brain works, and they found ways to manipulate it. That's what they started to do. So in 1875, in a German town called Leipzig, there was this professor named William Wundt who was putting together ideas and practices about psychology, and so he was one of the early pioneers in this. Their concern was psychology and consciousness based on theories and religious ideas. And so they start to learn how to control and to manipulate the masses. There was another psychologist called B.F. Skinner. He was an American psychologist, and he inspired such works, developed educational methods in order to train children using a reward system. So the public school system was part of this. When they implemented the public school system, they implemented this. The psychologist came with this in order to manipulate and to control the minds of Americans, especially at a young age. So with the educational system, Skinner coined the term operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a process where desired behaviors can be reinforced through reward, while undesired behaviors are punished to prevent their repeating. One of the things they did was the war on poverty. So in the war on poverty, which really has affected the Black community, they began to reinforce negative behaviors through the welfare system. And this is psychological, this is intentional. I'm not knocking anybody who's on welfare. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying to you is that the way they structured it was done through psychological warfare in order to control a group of people. And so when you understand the war on, what they call the war on poverty from the 1960s, LBJ came up with a strategy in order to break down the Black family and to keep Black people beholden or obligated to the liberal Democrats from now on. Now I know what a lot of people say. A lot of people will say, well, there's more white people than Black people on welfare, and that's a true statement. They'll say not all Black people, and I'm not suggesting that only Black people are on welfare or that all Black people are on welfare. I'm a African American. We were never on welfare, so that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you understand the war on poverty, it has affected the African American community and broke down the Black family worse than any other group of people. It's spilling over into the rest of society, but it's hurting Black people more than anything. and statistically, what I'm saying is 100% accurate. So in the 1960s, 25% of black babies were born out of wedlock. 75% were born in a household with a mother and a father. In 2017, the exact opposite is true. So in 2017, 25% of black babies are born in a family with a mother and father. 75% of them are born outside of wedlock. That's all during the time of the war on poverty. And they've spent $22 trillion saying that they're trying to fight the war on poverty. Yet you can understand that it's part of the psychological warfare that was given in order to control the masses, control the people, and control their thought processes. The war on drugs, the same thing. They created what's the campaign called the War on Drugs. It was found that the CIA was instrumental in even helping to transport drugs, and it flooded certain areas of especially minority communities in Los Angeles and even Harlem, New York. Over the last 50 years, they found that these drugs have been flooded in the community, all the while that they were supposed to be doing the war on drugs. And so I'm going to move on, but I want you to understand and look these things up for yourself. These things are all documented. They're well documented. They're not things that I'm coming up with on my own. And so B.F. Skinner, using the educational system in order to control the social engineering, as I discussed, they wanted to control the school system. And here's what Skinner believed: that children should be reared by the state to be trained from birth in order to behave in a unified manner. That was his intention through the psychological operation through the public school system. And Walden 2 was a book published in 1948, and they began to use that in Nazi Germany. See, most of these techniques, like I said, in the late 19th century, they started to really study psychology. In the early part of the 20th century, the Rockefeller Foundation and some of these other, the Tavistock Institute, and some of these people, they studied psychology. They were studying the group dynamic and how to control the masses, and they implemented most of these things in Nazi Germany, and it worked exceedingly well. It was the Rockefellers that funded the Nazis in science and education and psychology and all these things. They used those strategies in Nazi Germany, and you see a lot of it spilling over in the United States now. It was literally funded by American corporations and American institutions because they wanted to understand how to control the masses, how to socially engineer them to get them to follow the direction that they wanted to give them, and to give them their opinion. So when I say things like black people have been manipulated and brainwashed, it is intentional methodology that they use through social engineering that has allowed this groupthink with the black community. And most of the things that the black community now holds on to are things that were literally given for their destruction, whether it's the abortion industry and Planned Parenthood, which was based out of the eugenics movement, the breakdown of the family, and all these other things. Mass incarceration and the war on crime has targeted black people more than other racial groups. But the groups that have pushed these things the most are the ones that black people have gravitated towards more than anything. So Alfred Kinsey was another one. Alfred Kinsey, he was, most of you guys know, he was a psychologist that studies sexuality, human sexuality. He published his book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, which sought to wrestle human sexuality from its traditional principles of love and marriage. And so Kinsey started to study human sexuality, and he came up with ways in order to manipulate the masses through breaking down traditional sex roles. So he implemented all these different perversions, whether it's homosexuality and all these other things that they implemented. They broke down the family structure through pushing this agenda like the free love movement in the 60s. Now, Kinsey wrote his book in the 50s, but it was really pushed in the 60s through the hippie movement and free love. They did that intentionally because it broke down the moral fiber of the society, and people became more sexually free, because now the traditional roles of marriage and sexuality were broken down, and now you have this free love movement, which people believe you can do whatever felt good. You can have sex with whoever. Again, these things were funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. It was also funded by organizations called the Wellington House and the Tavistock Institute, and some of these other groups that came together in order to push this. You know, Gustave Le Bon served as a great inspiration to Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and most of you know Sigmund Freud, who was a great, very notable psychologist. Edward Bernays was his nephew, and if you've never heard of Edward Bernays, I know you've seen his work. Edward Bernays came up with the whole idea of propaganda, which was used in Nazi Germany, but now it's called public relations. But public relations is just another term for propaganda, and propaganda literally is a way to push an agenda to get the masses to accept it. And he started this propaganda movement, which in getting people to want to go to war. So in Nazi Germany, they used propaganda to help support the Germans to support Hitler's war movement. Also, it was a way that they used to manipulate England into going to the war, and ultimately the United States. They used propaganda to get them to go to agree to go to war. Alfred Bernays is most renowned for developing techniques in order to control large groups of people, and the most prominent promoter of such methods is the United States. To such an extent, he is often referred to the father of public relations. So whenever you hear public relations, it's just a different moniker for the term, what is actually for propaganda. And we know what propaganda is. Propaganda had developed a negative connotation, so instead of propaganda, they changed it, and now they call it public relations. Here's what Alfred Bernays said: if we understood the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and to regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. That's what they do through propaganda, and that's what the media does. The Tavistock Institute is still promoting their agenda, and it's getting bigger and stronger and more ingrained in society. The Tavistock Institute, through the application of propaganda, through drugs, popular culture, media, film studios, music labels, educational programs, and lobbying, the Tavistock Institute has shaped society, our culture, the way we respond to politics, wars, and changes in behavior and practices, one of which has been to shape our society's view on sexuality as discussed. Sexuality has changed. They use music, they use the drug culture. So if you look at the drug culture now, everybody's talking about marijuana, or the popular music talks about Molly, or all these other type of things. That is intentional. In the 60s, they used LSD as far as mind control. And so all these things are things that are intentional, and the Tavistock Institute has practiced these things. Also, the women's liberation movement is a way to break down the family structure and to create animosity between the races. So they try to promote one gender, one sex is better than the other. So the women's liberation movement was one that they pushed to try to make women say, oh, we're so oppressed, and they pushed this. And then there's this animosity between the sexes, between male and female, because you have the women pushing, saying they're being mistreated, and then you have men that were being victimized or feeling guilty. But think about, since the women's liberation movement, situations are worse off for the family. Since the women's liberation movement, we have more cases of harassment and rape, as well as sexually aggravated assault. There's more single parent families than there has been recorded previously. And all this is done during the time of the women's liberation movement, or girl power. You have more single women, broke down and lonely people, and messed up families as you ever did, because they have changed the natural order that God has put in place between man and woman and in the family structure. So they broke down these things. They pretended as though they were, that's what propaganda does. That's what social engineering does. They present a thesis, like I told you, thesis, the antithesis, and then they have a synthesis. So they present this idea to us, whether it's racism or sexism or whatever. They present it, they exaggerate it, they offer the solution, and ultimately they get the public to go in the direction they want them to go to. They decided to use famous people and celebrities throughout the media and different things and the culture. The entertainment industry, politics have been used to propagate opinions designed to disrupt the family union. Often Unknowingly, these pawns, acting on the promise of fame and wealth, work for institutions such as the Tavistock in order to encourage naive and impressionable minds to alter their perceptions to what is packaged as a popular or fashionable opinion in order to slowly change traditional culture. So they broke down the morals and values of society. They use celebrities and politicians, and these people, they're actually working for the social engineers, and they push this agenda. And because they are famous, they're our favorite athlete or our favorite musician, or they're a politician, and they're part of our political party. You think about Black America. Black America was the most outspoken against gay marriage, and in 2008 in California, they literally had a vote called Proposition 8 that they protected traditional marriage between a man and woman, natural marriage. The African American community voted in favor of 70+% to uphold traditional marriage between a man and a woman. So what did they do? In order to socially engineer, they put President Obama, who was an African American male, and he became outspoken for the LGBT community, and now African Americans now more and more are beginning to accept the idea of gay marriage. That's how they manipulated them. They use propaganda, they use celebrities, they socially engineer it to change the morals and the values of the society. And if you look in the 1969 U.S. Population Control Memorandum, they actually said that they wanted to promote homosexuality as part of their population control agenda. So these are things that they wrote. Like I said, all this stuff is documented. It's not something that I came up with. When we understand the symptoms, we understand that society is failing morally. We are breaking down, and we have new ideologies. You know, as I said, the Institute, they promote drugs, promiscuity, marriage, divorce, abortion, homosexuality, morality, and all these things that have gone against the grain. But because they have socially engineered it, they are getting the public to more and more accept these things that weren't traditionally accepted. And it's part of their control of the masses. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So it's being very effective. Now, what do they do? When I talk about the global elite, I'm talking about the 0.5% of the world's population. Most of them are behind the scenes. You probably have never heard of the Rothschild family. You probably never heard of some of these people. They're behind the scenes. The ones that are visible are the ones usually that's getting that they're pushing the agenda. They're getting the promise of wealth, fame, and fortune. And because of that, they are helping to engineer society. But the powers that be are the ones behind the scenes. Now, there's different organizations. They're called think tanks. And so the Illuminati, or the global elite, they said in order to push their agenda to control the population, they use the educational system, mass media, entertainment, politics, banking, and all these other different organizations. And they have certain groups that they all are part of. Now, these things haven't happened by chance, but they are very intentional. And consider people that are connected with certain groups. I'm going to name some of the groups. You can look them up yourself. And these are the think tanks that the people that are part of the social engineering process, the people behind the scenes and the people that are on the forefront are part of these organizations, and they're helping to control things. So you have the Committee of 300, you have Chatham House, the Bilderberg Group, the Commission on Foreign Relations, which is also known as the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, the Tavistock Institute. All of these are advisors and directors and members, shareholders of the largest corporations in the world, and all of them shape the culture that we live in. Some of them in front of the camera, some of them behind the scenes, and but it is very strategic. So I want you to understand what's going on. That when we see this this frantic war against President Trump and people like that, people that are outspoken, when they start talking about truthers, when you see mainstream media, we are in a post-truth era. And when I say a post-truth era, it means that the truth is no longer important. They are promoting a specific agenda. And if we're not mindful of it, like the Bible says, we will be taking advantage of it. So I want you to understand, I want you to be mindful of these things so that you don't fall victim to them and so that the enemy doesn't have victory in us. We can rise up, we can rebel against the system, but we have to have our eyes open and we have to have our spiritual mind. It's only through the power of the Holy Spirit will we have the spiritual enlightenment and the strategies of the kingdom in order to overcome these things. Bless you. This has been Dr. Joe Green, founder of the 2019 movement. Please log on and look at all of the other videos I've posted. Subscribe to my channels if you see fit. Please contribute for us to promote this. We want more and more people to to be brought into awareness of what's going on, and we want to win. We want to destroy the kingdom of darkness and push the agenda of the kingdom of God. Love you guys. Shalom. Blessings and peace to you. Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, and I'm the founder of the 2019 movement, and I just wanted to give a brief synopsis of the 2019 movement. Several years ago, I was watching the news, as most of us have, and we saw a lot of rioting in the streets. We saw the death of Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Mike Brown, and just to name a few. And there was a lot of racial tension in the country. And I remember praying about it, and I felt the Lord say, you got to look deeper beyond the surface, that racism was just a distraction, but there's much deeper issues that we have to deal with. And as I began to study, I began to really focus on what God was trying to say through what's happening. You know, this issue of race is really coming to a head, and there's a reason behind it. The reason that the Lord is allowing this to come to such a boiling point, if you will, in America. I believe that the future, not only of the black race in America, but of America itself, is hanging in the balance, and God is about to do something amazing. We've come up with the 2019 Movement Manifesto. Go to 2019movement.org. You can read the manifesto in its full. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but a manifesto is a published verbal declaration of the intentions, the motives, or views of an issuer, be it an individual, group, a political party, or a government. A manifesto usually accepts a previously published opinion or public consensus and promotes a new idea with a prescriptive notion for carrying out changes that should be made. That's what a manifesto is. What is the focus of the 2019 Movement Manifesto? The focus of the manifesto, in order to move anything forward, you have to come up with a strategy. You have to express the plan so that it can be carried out. The Bible says to write the vision and make it plain so that you can achieve it. Even business people will tell you that you should be setting goals, because unless you can express and write down your goals, that there's a good chance that you won't accomplish them. Write the vision and make it plain. That's what we're doing. The focus objectives are a starting point of the 2019 movement. We're looking to build a network of people that have an awareness of what's going on and will work together to achieve those goals. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's a kingdom movement of racial reconciliation, restoring and reconnecting with the destiny of the African people of African descent in America. I believe that in order for us to move forward as a country, we have to reconcile between races. We have to reconcile back to God's purpose and His plan, and in order for us to achieve what God has. I believe that the future of America and the future of black people in America are all tied into us reconciling back to what God intended. So the movement is pro-God, pro-life, pro-natural marriage, pro-family, pro-America, pro-education, pro-economic empowerment, and most importantly, it's pro-kingdom, because the kingdom of God has come, and we are trying to manifest and to promote the kingdom of God through our efforts. And this is something that will be good for America and be good for individuals, but more importantly, will fulfill God's great purpose and plan for people of color in America. We believe that this is a generation that will help to realize the destiny for the black race in America. I heard the Spirit of the Lord said, could it be that this is the generation that He's raising up for such a time as this? He has brought these things to the surface for us to deal with it, and we know that we have the authority over all the works of the flesh. And so I just bless you. I pray that you connect with the 2019 movement. Go to the 2019movement.org. Connect with us. We'd love to come out and share the vision. I am open to come and speak. I love to come and share and answer any questions you may have. My contact information is on the website. I am Dr. Joe Green, and until next time, shalom. I love you. And let's get the movement started. Be blessed.